at home. My name is Elia. Welcome to my BGCSE biology lesson, Cell Biology Part 2. Today we are looking at specialized cells. So when we are talking about specialized cells, these are cells that has a specific function, and in order for these cells to have that specific function, it means they can't look like the general cells as you saw in the part 1, right? So remember, the structure determines the function. So we are saying these cells are specialized. So in order for them to be specialized, it means they should have special structure, special appearance, and special properties that will enable them to do those different functions. So we have specialized cells for animals, and then we have specialized cells for plants. So if you look here, the first specialized cell here is what we call a red blood cell. So we find a red blood cell in animals, and then this cell, it specializes in the transportation of oxygen around the body. Now let's see how is it adapted for this function. So if you look at this cell, it does not have a nucleus, and then the absence of a nucleus creates an extra space for the uptake of oxygen. That's the first adaptation. And then the second adaptation, if you look at this cell, it looks more like a disc. And because of that, it increases the surface area for the oxygen uptake. And then the third adaptation, this cell, it has a red pigment called hemoglobin. That's why I've colored it red. This pigment here, we call it a hemoglobin. Yeah. So this hemoglobin, it is able to bind with oxygen, and then it forms a molecule called oxyhemoglobin. And then as the blood is circulating around the body, when oxyhemoglobin reaches those areas where oxygen is in demand, we are going to have dissociation, and then we will release oxygen, and then hemoglobin goes there, such that now you can supply oxygen to those parts in need. And then that was the third adaptation. The fourth one, if you look at this cell, it is very, very flexible. And now because it is flexible, it is able to squeeze itself even through the tiniest blood vessels. For example, if you look at the vessels on the finger, compare them to the vessels on other parts of the body. They are so tiny, but still they can access oxygen. This is because this cell, it is flexible and it can squeeze through those tiny blood vessels. And then this was a red blood cell. And then if you look here, still under animals, there is what we call a nerve cell. So we find a nerve cell in the nervous system, and then this cell is responsible for the transportation of the impulses around the body. So let's see how is it adapted. So if you look at the cell body of this cell, it has some structures which look more like threads. We call this the dendrites. So the function of dendrites is to collect information from different parts of the body, and then after the information is collected, it's going to travel through another structure here. We call this a nerve fiber. So the dendrites will collect your impulses from a different stimuli, and then those impulses, they will travel through a nerve fiber to the nervous system. And then if you look around the nerve fiber, there is another layer, external layer here. We call this the myelin sheath. And because now this cell has the myelin sheath around the nerve fiber, it means now we are going to have those impulses traveling at a faster rate. And then the other function of this myelin sheath is to prevent the loss of impulses out of this cell so that they go to their target area. Now let's move to specialized cells in plants. So if you look at the cell here, this one we call it a Palisade cell. So it's a Palisade cell, and then we find it in the Palisade mesophyll. When we are looking at the leaf, there's that tissue called the Palisade mesophyll. That's why we are going to have this kind of cells. So if you look at the distribution of chloroplast in this Palisade cell, there are so many as you can see, right? Which means now this cell, it is going to specialize in photosynthesis. And because now it has more chloroplasts, as you can see, because now it has more chloroplast, it means it can trap light energy. Remember at part 1 we said the function of the chloroplast is to trap light energy for photosynthesis. So because now the cell is rich in chloroplast, it means it is very, very efficient in the uptake of light. And then when the uptake of light is efficient, it means even photosynthesis rate is going to be high, right? And then your plant will end up with more sugars. And then the last cell that I'm going to talk about, this is a root hair cell. So this is how a root hair cell looks like. So this one, it specializes in the uptake of water and mineral salts. Now let's see how is it adapted for that function, the uptake of water and mineral salts. So if you look at this cell here, there is something that looks like a finger. We call this an extension. So now because this cell has an extension, it means its surface area has been increased. And the moment you increase the surface area, it means the amount of water you are going to take, the amount of mineral ions you are going to absorb, they also increase. So this is the first adaptation. And then the second adaptation, let's look at the vacuole of this cell. So you can see that the vacuole is large, right? And now because the vacuole is large, it means the quantity of water that can be taken at a given time is also high. So this cell can take a large quantity of water because of this large vacuole. And then the third and last adaptation, if you look at the concentration of the cell sub in this vacuole, it is very, very high. And now because the concentration is high, it means we are going to have a water potential gradient being created on this cell against the soil. So because the water potential is low in this cell, we are going to have water molecules moving from the soil into the cell through the process of osmosis, and then more water is going to move inside. Remember, water molecules, they will move from where they are high to where they are low, right? So once we have this cell becoming more concentrated, it means it promotes the movement of water from the soil, where water is at a high concentration, into the cell. Remember, this is a root hair cell, and then the function of root is to absorb water from the soil. So it promotes that movement of water into the cell at a large quantity. That's all I had for you for the specialized cells. See me again in Cell Biology Part 3, where we'll be talking about cell processes. Thank you.